Professor Andrew Pessin, welcome to the Honest Report podcast.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
We're happy to have you here. You've recently started the Institute for the Critical Study of Antizionism. Tell us a little bit about what this endeavor seeks to achieve.
That's a great question. I've been in this space with you for myself at least 11 years now, sort of focusing carefully on the campus situation, in particular, watching this sort of slow motion, horrible accident get worse and worse and bigger. And then obviously culminating in the campus response to October 7th, which was not widespread horror and condemnation, but unfortunately widespread endorsement and celebration. So the space is familiar to me. And what became clear to me as the years went on, that we, and by we I mean Jews, Zionists, all sane, decent, rational people in sort of growing concentric circles, we've been watching the situation get worse and worse. In some cases, contributing to it, honestly, that could be a separate conversation. But we've done a number of things all to try to deal with it, all of which, just empirically speaking, failed. And the proof of that is the campus response to October 7th. We failed to stem the growing tide of Jew hatred that produces large numbers of people who are willing to rally on behalf of Hamas and support massacres of Jews. So here's the one thing we didn't do in all those years, certainly not in a collective, organized, or community level operation. We didn't go after that specific ideology that turns people into Jew haters. We certainly pushed back against anti-Semitism, and that's very important. All these things had value and were worth doing, and I participated myself. We pushed back against anti-Semitism. We worked hard on the IRA definition. We did a lot to promote Zionism. We invoked lawfare at certain points, but none of them got, in my view, at the root cause of the problem, which is this ideology that turns people into Jew haters. And for lack of a better word, we'll call that ideology anti-Zionism. It's really a whole set of related ideologies. It's closely connected to progressivism on campuses in particular. The right wing, mostly off campus, has their own version of it, although it's also growing on campus now as well. And so the set of ideologies is what turns people into Jew haters. And we tried very hard, and I participated in this. We tried to put anti-Zionism in the anti-Semitism box. I wrote an 80-page philosophy paper arguing anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. And of course it is. We all know that it is. But just empirically speaking, we succeeded in persuading only ourselves, and the campus environment at large in general distinguishes anti-Zionism from anti-Semitism. So it's time for a new approach. It's time to really put anti-Zionism itself on trial in the courtroom under our critical lens. After all, the people who hate the Jews today call themselves anti-Zionists, so we should call it anti-Zionism. That is our enemy, apart from whatever relationship it may have to anti-Semitism. So that's the idea behind this new institute. It's going to be a scholarly enterprise. It's involving primarily professors, also independent scholars. But the idea is to produce, as the tagline says, we need teams of scholars producing reams of scholarship about anti-Zionism to expose anti-Zionism as a set of ideologies as the hate movement that it is. So that's the idea. Focus really carefully on anti-Zionism. And yeah, along the way, some might bring out anti-Semitism. It's all in play. But the idea is to focus critically on anti-Zionism.
Now, a lot of people, you would certainly say erroneously, but a lot of people see anti-Zionism as simply a modern manifestation of anti-Semitism, right? The Nazis saw it in a racial sense, and today it's portrayed as anti-Zionism. But you say it's actually a hate movement in its own right. Can you unpack for that a little bit for us?
So, I would avoid urge the Jewish community to avoid too long a conversation on this issue, because in the end, it's a terminological thing. Anyone who's sort of taking the angle I'm taking agrees anti-Zionism is a form of Jew hate. They just want to suggest that what goes by the name anti-Semitism is a different form of Jew hate, and want to reserve the word anti-Semitism for one specific form of it, the racial form, the Nazi form, the white supremacist form, which has a very characteristic set of libels and allegations about the Jews, including, world power and things like, and racial impurity and things like that. On the neo-Nazi right-wing version of Jew hate, Jews are foreigners, not white, right? And they are a threat to our white Christian civilization. the contemporary manifestation of Jew hatred in the form of anti-Zionism has a different set of libels and allegations. On this view, Jews are in fact white supremacist oppressors and colonists in the Middle East. So it's using a lot of different tropes and different language. It's underlying the same Jew hatred. So for people, and I myself share this, the word anti-Semitism for many people just means Jew hate. So if that's what it means, then of course anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. But if we're being a little bit more precise, anti-Semitism, that word really picks out one specific form of Jew hatred, and anti-Zionism differs in many ways from that. So what we're doing is granting, okay, anti-Zionism is not identical to anti-Semitism as the haters believe, because they're not neo-Nazi right-wing white supremacists. That's right. Campus movement is not governed by that. They're doing something different, so we're going to grant them that. You're right. It's anti-Zionism. It's not the same thing as that other form of anti-Semitism. However, the point is to expose it as a form of Jew hatred in its own right. So that's what we need to do.
Now, given that this is a scholarly endeavor, do you see the goal here to change discourse right on an academic level, or ultimately to change what's being taught in the classrooms as well?
Thank you for that fantastic question. So I do believe that campus is ground zero for the problem, but at this point, the problem, we all agree, is everywhere. It's in our city streets, it's in our governments, it's in international relations, it's in the UN, it's in the NGOs, it's in the media, right? So, but campus really was ground zero for this. Campus got pretty fully captured over the last 20 to 25 years by anti-Zionism. We've had whole generations of students sort of drenched in this ideology who then graduate and go out into the world, and they go into politics and diplomacy and the media, etc. So the problem that we're seeing everywhere really was incubated on the campus. And if we're going to fix the problem, and my focus is long term, we need to fix the campus. We have many fires burning simultaneously right now, and there's lots of people addressing each of those. I'm trying to focus on the longer game, fixing the campus situation. And it starts in the scholarship and with the professors. They are really the core issue here. But of course, the the scholarship, the scholars and the professors are the ones who are teaching these students. And right now, what we have, so we care very much about the students. Right now, we have a situation where the anti-Zionists absolutely dominate the public square in most universities, right? They're not everyone's an anti-Zionist, but they're the loud ones. They're filled with passion and anger. They're unafraid to say the most outrageous things about Jews and about Israelis. No one pushes back. Almost no one pushes back on any campus, and that allows students, even the I like to believe the number of percent who are really haters is relatively small on most campuses, but there's that large middle ground, 50 or 60% of students who don't have hate in their heart, don't really care much about Israel and related issues, but they too are going through 4 years of an environment where the default assumption is that Israel represents everything evil about humanity. So those are the ones we want to reach. We want to make sure that their college experience isn't just this one-sided hate fest dominated by the anti-Zionists. We need to mobilize more and more professors to teach courses, do conferences, produce scholarship that exposes anti-Zionism for what it is, which is basically it's a corrupt form of scholarship ultimately, but also it's a hate movement. So yeah, we're focusing on the scholars and the professors because they're the ones who ultimately set the agenda and establish the atmosphere on most of these campuses. But our concern is absolutely the students. They should not be subjected to a one-sided hate-filled indoctrination. They should at least bare minimum be aware that there's a very different way of thinking about all these issues so that they can begin to make up their own mind. So yeah, the focus is the campus, and the primary focus of our work is going to be the professors, but the expectation is that will absolutely change the campus environment, which will affect students. And we also care about being public facing in other ways, but the primary focus is on the professors.
Now, how much of what you're trying to do is to reclaim the word Zionism? And I ask because there's something of a debate within the pro-Israel community right now who say, look, Israel's a fact. It's a stated fact. It's there. It doesn't require an ideology anymore. It doesn't require the word Zionism. While others say you can't simply abandon this to anti-Israel activists. Just curious for your view on this.
I hope they pay you well because your questions are absolutely excellent. So you should get a raise. Whatever they're paying you, they should pay you some more. Um, I wouldn't say that the Institute has a position on those things, right? The Institute, I want it to be, and I should mention, we have 270 scholars on the roster. That number is growing almost every day. We have over about 4,800 followers on Substack. That number is growing every day by 5 or 10 or 12, etc. So the Institute, what I hope and expect, because this is meant to be a proper academic enterprise respecting academic norms, there's going to be a diversity of opinions amongst the people in this institute. And in fact, it's nonpartisan. So, I want to avoid it being labeled as like a right-wing partisan thing. It isn't. We have a number of left-wing scholars who are actually pretty critical of Israel and pretty critical of Zionism, but recognize that anti-Zionism is a hate movement, right? You don't need to be a Zionist to be concerned about the grip that anti-Zionism has on the academy. So that said, the question you're raising is a real one. It's a fascinating one. People should continue to discuss it. Is it time to retire the word Zionism? And indeed, I, for a number of years, have tended to refer to these people as anti-Israelists rather than anti-Zionists. And I think a case could be, there's something different to be anti-Israel versus anti-Zionist. But that said, different people in the Institute might have different opinions about what to do with the word Zionism. I don't see it as particularly part of our mission to reclaim the word Zionism. It's a fascinating question. We're focusing on anti-Zionism because that's what they call themselves. So we need to expose them for what they are. And it might well be a natural consequence of this is the reclaiming of the word Zionism, right? Once you show that anti-Zionism contorts and perverts the word and concept of Zionism to evil ends, then, right now Zionism is a slur on most campuses, especially Zio, right? They use the abbreviation. You're a Zio. My own children have been called Zios on their campuses, right? So it would be lovely to reclaim that word, and it's a possible consequence of exposing anti-Zionism as a hate movement to realize that Zionism is not a hateful word, and maybe we can start using that again because, even though Israel does now exist, there's still something to the idea of Zionism as a general movement of which Israel is a product, but which is bigger than that. And like I said, that's for other people or for down the road. It's not our primary focus.
So 270 scholars, that's quite a tremendous amount in such a short period of time. What in your mind does this tell you about the thirst for standing up to some of this anti-Zionist propaganda in the classroom?
Thank you. So first of all, I believe, and I'm not alone in this, the situation is dire. It's an emergency. It's existential, not only for Israel in general, but for Jews in the diaspora, certainly Jews on campuses. So I think a lot of people see that. I'm thrilled to see that there's sort of interest and enthusiasm for this, as evidenced by 270 scholars on the roster. And that's, by the way, without particularly active recruiting. I've reached out to a few people along the way, but people are coming to me. So there's a need and there's an interest, and if we will it, it's no dream. Let's hope for that. So I think, part of it is, for a long time, the other side, as I said, has dominated the public square, and they've done it very, very cleverly. They do it. What helps them do it, first of all, is they're very passionate and angry, right? And I actually get that. If you believed, that the Jews were being genocided, you would do all sorts of extreme things, and you'd be very passionate, and you'd disrupt the world, right? Like I get it. If you actually believe that, the anger and the passion makes sense. Of course, I believe it's based on false premises, all of that. But what they managed to do, and this is part of what I mean by anti-Zionism as a set of ideologies, progressivism labels that whole package of ideologies as anti-racist. This is what it is to be anti-racist. And therefore, anyone who critiques any element of it, and this, we've seen this even in internal critiques, people who really believe in critical race theory, but sometimes you'll disagree about a particular point or a particular strategy. Well, if the norm is that this is anti-racism and someone disagrees, they must be a racist. And so cancel culture, as it has manifested itself in the last, at least dozen years and more, has put the fear of God into too many people, afraid to speak out and afraid to criticize, afraid to say, for example, Black Lives Matter. Many Jews tend to be liberal leaning, really upset about racism, wanted to be all in on Black Lives Matter. At least if Black Lives Matter was a matter of truly confronting racism, almost every Jew would be in on it, and most Jews were. It also happens to be virulently anti-Zionist. Like from the beginning, their whole platform was just vicious against Israel, filled with lies and stuff like that. But it was not possible And I remember this vividly at the time, when the Black Lives Matter first became formal and started their website, and I looked with, I agree with a lot of it. And then I get to the pages about Israel and I realize, I can't be part of this movement. But anyone who objected to that is instantly labeled a racist. It's just, right, there's a way this operation works. And so there's been this fear criticizing. I sometimes think of it as the emperor's new clothes sort of example, and just everyone's too terrified to say the emperor has no clothes. Well, that's what needs to stop now. And there's safety in numbers, and hopefully courage in numbers. So for many professors, I've heard from at least several who've said the following, like, I really don't like what's going on my campus, but I think I'm alone and I'm afraid to speak up because, then all the critical attention's turned on me and I'm a racist and I'm canceled. And so that's why I mentioned it's almost the goal is in numbers. Like we need teams of scholars producing reams of scholarship. We need to show there's a large body of people. We need to produce a volume of scholarship because that's what gives courage to all the people who are sort of silently out there, not liking what they're seeing, but too afraid to speak up. Well, if they're not alone, if they're part of an organization, if we can bring to a campus, and this is one of our projects, bring a conference to a campus where a dozen people come who critique anti-Zionism, well, then hopefully that will provide the incentive to get more people speaking up. So the fact that I have 270 on the roster, not all of them are going to be active and not all of them are going to be vocal, but there's 270, mostly professors who are interested in this work, hopefully getting motivated by this work. I'm incentivizing them to start producing scholarship in this area. So, that's the goal. There's interest out there, and that's what gives me hope in the long run that we can have some success, because there are a lot of people out there who don't like what anti-Zionism is and what it has done to the academy. And we're starting to mobilize those people.
Professor Andrew Pessin, thank you again so much for joining us.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for your really excellent questions.